obviously, we're talking about Thick as a Brick 2 and your upcoming tour. Now, the press release said that a chance meeting with Derek Shulman helped to bring this about. How did that happen?
Well, chance in the sense that Derek Shulman and other members of Gentle Giants obviously go back a long way in my musical life, and a couple of times over the years I've run into members of the band, including Derek, when he seemed to be a working musician and took up the cause of A&R signings of various bands, including Nickelback and others, to record companies. And so he a couple of times in 2009, 2010 was trying to persuade me about making a sequel to Thick as a Brick, and I launched into my usual well-rehearsed patter of how I didn't want to go back and do some nostalgic piece of revisiting and come up with a musical equivalent of Rocky 7, and it just really wasn't something I could at all be excited about. I mean, I'd been there and visited this notion a few years before at the request of a couple of other record company guys in the UK, Chrysalis people, but it was just something I really just didn't feel any reason to do. There's no underlying, not only a wish or a desire, but from an artistic point of view, no underlying theme or concept or reason really to do it. It was only when I was talking to Derek, probably at the end of 2010, we one of us, I don't remember which one, said something about, I wonder what the little Gerald Bostock guy would be doing today.
Mm-hmm.
He being the fictitious character, supposedly the author of the lyrics of Thick as a Brick. And what would have happened to the St. Cleeve Chronicle, in this day and age of print media, financial difficulties for all print media, large and small, that probably wouldn't exist anymore. Or maybe it would just be an online, website for the community. Those two thoughts started to go through my mind. So in February of last year, I sketched out a scenario based on not what happened next in 1972 or 73, but jumping ahead 40 years to a point now where we might sort of look back on something, and in a sense through the character of Gerald Bostock and the various possibilities of different directions that life may have taken him in. It's really an opportunity for us through Gerald to look back on our own lives and imagine the things that happened, might have happened, didn't happen, might still happen. So it's something I think works for an older generation, but as soon as I started writing it, I thought this actually really works for youngsters as well, because it reminds me so much of the decision making and the process of being potentially affected by random events and interventions in an early part, a very sensitive part of life, post-puberty, when you can very easily be drawn one way or the other, and not necessarily make decisions based on rational, calm thought amidst the turmoils of puberty. So all of that, looking back, and also for younger people looking forward, people in their teens, it's quite a nice idea as a vehicle for exploration of a number of essentially parallel possibilities, and the possibility of there being some fate or predestiny of a conclusion to life, almost regardless of what path you take. So those thoughts just gelled in a period of 2 weeks of writing a lot of music, and a couple of pieces of music that I already had tucked away that were quickly bent into shape, and one particularly became quite a pivotal part of the album, which is a piece I wrote a couple of years earlier for flute and sitar, a piece I wrote for Anushka Shankar to play, and so I added lyrics to that and a few changes in the arrangements, and that became kind of a musical cornerstone to write the rest of the album around, and it's some of the music we actually tried out on stage during the last year, suitably with disguised lyrics or titles, so people didn't get the message too early that we were
Oh, right. Right.
working on a new album.
When you approached the writing of this new record, did you find in any way that it was important for you to go back to the original and try to tie the two together stylistically, musically?
Well, there had to be a bit of a nod and a wink here and there in terms of musical references and lyrical references, to have that close cousin relationship. But I didn't want to write it as a natural musical sequel. I wanted the music to stand up on its own. But what I did decide to do pretty early on was to adopt the same sound palette, the same instrumentation. So it's heavy on Hammond organ of the traditional sort, and the Gibson electric guitar, and the acoustic guitars, and the glockenspiels, and odd little signature moments, I think, that are quite evident on Thick as a Brick 1. They made their appearance again on Thick as a Brick 2. So the sound palette was the same. The way in which it was made was the same, in the sense that I really wanted this to be an album that was played pretty live in the studio, with everybody playing together, and not just a huge amount of overdubs and dislocated bits. So it was rehearsed and recorded in a period of 3 weeks, really just bang, 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 just as the original Thick as a Brick was recorded. And again, not even extending to doing the album cover, going on to then work on the album cover. That was another period of 2 or 3 weeks of building up all the material for, in this case, stcleve.com, as well as the conventional artwork for both the CD and eventually vinyl size artwork. So a lot of work gone into it, and now I'm at work on the preparation of all the audiovisual material that we're using on stage during the show, and it's a big project, and one that will take me through to the middle of 2013, after which I never want to see it again.
Yeah, I would imagine that's
at least not for another 40 years.
Did you? Is there any part of you that feels a little bit of trepidation about revisiting an album that was so successful? I mean, no matter what you come up with, it's going to be compared to something that's been in the culture for 40 years.
Well, trepidation is sort of, I suppose, one way to describe it. I mean, I think I would choose my words more carefully and describe it as, for me and the other guys, being in a state of abject terror. Not really, no. It's I think our expectations artistically are high. Our expectations commercially and in terms of approval rating are tempered by reality, and it will emerge to a resounding symphony of silence from most people who will just go, what? Amongst some of the fans, I think they'll think, wow, this is really great, something to get our teeth into. This is a big sort of meaty thing we can really listen to, and we can think about it, and we can read all the lyrics and different languages, and do all these, sort of be involved in it in a way that perhaps they haven't been involved with the listening experience to albums for a long time. Because people hear more music than ever before. We're subjected to, and wherever we go, whatever we do, we're hearing music just non-stop. But the question is, do we ever listen to any of it? And I think the answer is usually no. We employ music as a comfort blanket to get us through the stress and strain of the day, to mask some of the unpleasant noises as we plug into our smartphones and our iPods and listen on the train or the bus or go jogging, listening to the music or whatever people do.
Right.
I don't think you really listen in the way that people perhaps at one time they would have gone out and bought Sgt. Pepper or Dark Side of the Moon or whatever classic albums might have caught people's attention. They would invite a few friends over, and people would sit in silence and listen to the music. I'm not sure that really ever happens. I mean, getting someone to sit down and listen to a whole album. Does anybody do that anymore? When was the last time you did that? Not that I'm trying to throw the interview back at you, but know, 1975 maybe. I don't think people really do listen. You know, I think we hear the music, we plug into music, but we have short attention spans, and we tend to download individual tracks from iTunes rather than a whole album. And you know, we buy music DVD, we watch it once, and then it disappears into a drawer somewhere, or we lend it to a friend, and then we watch it again. Hence the incredible size and sales of music DVDs since they started 10 years ago. Just started off with a pretty big bang, and then just gone away to the point where it's not economically really viable for anyone to make a music DVD these days with any expectation of getting their money back. So you know, I think things are different in cultural terms, and I think it'd be unreasonable for me to expect this to have the impact commercially in the marketplace that the original Thick as a Brick did. In other words, I don't think I'm going to be waving to you from the top of the Billboard charts in a couple of months' time.
I know people on either side of this equation. I know people who had a lot of success decades ago who feel embittered by the change in the culture and the commercial fortune, and I know people who look at the internet as an opportunity to get their music out there, whether it's profitable or not. Where do you stand in that equation?
Well, I've taken the view during the last few years that it really wasn't worth my time and effort to go into the studio to make a Jethro Tull album, because frankly, you know, the expectations of an audience would be based around I suppose wanting to hear something that was, you know, a natural follow-up to perhaps the music of the Aqualung album. You know, they might think they want to have a new Jethro Tull album. What they actually want is a new old Jethro Tull album. You know, they want something that fulfills that promise of a musical style and performance. And I don't think you can wind the clock back, because there's different musicians. You know, there's certainly myself and Martin Barr from that era of Jethro Tull. I mean, all the other guys who were around, they don't play anymore, most of them. Maybe some do, probably not very well, but there's certainly a lot of them who just quit playing music, and that's it, over. And they haven't touched their instruments for 30-odd years or whatever. So I don't ever see there being that kind of a revival, in the sense that the members of Black Sabbath reputedly were, maybe still are, getting together, but those are not options, you know, for us. I absolutely can't see ever playing with the guys who were on the Aqualung album. Just something that can't happen. And I think as soon as you work in the context with other musicians, you know, it's really hard to really authentically reproduce that rather more retro kind of approach. And so making the album that I had made, I didn't feel with that constraint. I wasn't trying to make an album that sounded like the original Thick as a Brick. I was trying to make an album that conceptually tied in like a tight-fitting piece of a jigsaw puzzle, but musically I didn't have to stop and think really what I was doing. I mean, I naturally include elements that I would anyway writing any piece of music, where I will reiterate, I will develop, I will reprise, I will modify, I will use the devices that are available to me as a composer and orchestrator to give something some artistic credibility. But I'm not really doing it terribly consciously. It's a natural, organic flow when you're writing music. That there's a theme that you had, and you reprise that theme, but you give it different lyrics, different sense, different tempo, different key, whatever it may be. But you're working with in the sense of a big piece of music, you're working in a way which seems very organic, and I didn't substantially reorder very much on the album. I juxtaposed a couple of things during the writing process, but most of it just followed the template that I'd set out, if not on a piece of paper, at least on a screen of a computer. You know, in terms of just the bare bones, the skeleton of the whole thing, and that blueprint, that template became the whole album, and I just stuck pretty resolutely to that skeletal framework that I devised on day one. And as I say, a couple of things got switched around, but it wasn't very actually printed it out at that point, but it was all scored, and the other guys in the band had it in their possession one way or another for 6 months before they ever really had to look at it again with a view to learning the music. So, that was just to do with the fact of a working year and schedules of touring and so on. And it was kind of good anyway to leave it alone for a while and come back to it. And again, very little change took place in the recording process. There was inevitably, you tweak things, you change something, and a few little extra bits of music went in, some additional ideas that were just very spontaneous. But for the most part, it stayed pretty true to the original score that we did back in the first week of March.
Now, you probably are aware, you must be aware, that with you announcing this as a solo project, it's brought up all kinds of rumors of fallings out in the band. Is this the end of Jethro Tull? Does it have anything to do with that?
It really depends on whether Martin is able to get the time off from the Stones tours, because as you probably have heard, there's been a big bust-up between Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, and Martin Barr has been asked to officially become the Stones' new guitar player. And I just had an email from Keith actually a couple of nights ago saying, was there any chance of coming out to tour with me this year? I'm just kidding, of course.
Of course, yeah.
But those are the sort of ridiculous things that people talk about. The reality is that I had a long talk with Martin and with Dave Perry last summer, and explained to them, that I was working on a number of projects for this year, one of which was this. And I know from lots of discussions with Martin over the last few years, he had certain things that he wanted to do in terms of revisiting some of the early Jethro Tull catalogue and making a new record, based on some of the, I suppose, the keynote guitar riffs and things that he feels obviously a close-up relationship with. And during the times in the last few years when I've done increasingly more solo dates, Martin has developed a number of other associations with other people, and so he's exploring those further this year and has a whole lot of dates scheduled for 2012 and some recording projects in mind. So, we have quite legitimate time off really, but that's Dome Perry, on the other hand, is overdue for some degree of surgery, which he's finally decided he's going to do this year. So good luck to him. But it's good to have some time off from what can very easily become the greatest hits tour.
Right.
Again.
Right.
And built simply as Jethro Tull, the expectations are always going to be that it's the mainstream, the heavy hitter bits of repertoire, which is fine. I love doing it. It's no problem at all. It's just that life is too short to keep putting off other projects that I want to do. And I did rather fancy doing an album that was perhaps along the lines of loosely something you might call progressive rock, as well as a string quartet album and the solo singer-songwriter acoustic guitar album that are the other two projects that I'm working on this year. So, there are these other things that I guess we all should be advised to do while we're still able to do them. And, there's not an infinite number of years ahead for these kind of activities. I think it's good to get on and do it. But it just really matters to me what people say or talk about. People love to speculate and pontificate, but it's really not that important. I mean,
right.
I found myself when I was reading Keith Richards' book a few months ago, thinking it's going to be very hard after that kind of exercise of washing a lot of dirty laundry in public like that. It's going to be really, really hard for Mick Jagger and Keith Richards to get together again and
Yeah.
Do anything positive. I think there's a good lesson to be learned there, that I think dignified silence is usually the best course to take, and Keith the official biography of Steve Jobs in the last year or so, since it was known he was dying, and he employed a biographer to write his life story without fear of editing or censoring. A lot of stuff came out that really, it's not. There's a lot. It's just as well Steve Jobs isn't around today. Otherwise, there'd be lawsuits flying around, I think. But no, it's putting the stuff in print is just. I just think it's so unnecessary. There's always a rather morbid public sentiment that wants to lap this sort of stuff up. But I have to say, compared to a Jagger Richards relationship or a Steve Jobs' life, loves, and an enemies kind of expose, whatever happens in Jethro Tull rates about 0.1 on the Richter scale. It's just not even going to shake the table, let alone the house.
It's not like a situation like Yes, where they've gone out and gotten the singer from a Jethro Tull tribute band and gone back out on the road or whatever.
That is obviously something that has happened kind of before with Mick Abrahams, the original Jethro Tull guitar player from '68, who went out on the road. And I mean, to be fair, we talked about it at the time. I said, well, great, Mick, I played the This Was album, and I knew he'd got some singer flute player from a tribute band, and I think Clyde Bunker and somebody else playing that gave it a bit of credibility. But I said, make me really careful, because there's obviously a little club tour, but the people that you're playing for are going to they're going to try and put bums on seats and bill it as Jethro Tull in big letters with Mick Abrahams sort of somewhere in small letters underneath, if you can read it. And that's exactly what happened. I found myself seeing advertisements around the UK for a tour featuring Jethro Tull, and I rang a few venues and said, excuse me, have you got any tickets left for the show? And yeah. And I said, I just want to be sure before I buy a ticket. I mean, we are actually seeing Jethro Tull here, are we? Is this the...
Oh, gosh.
Said, yes, Jethro Tull, yes. And I said, the guy who stands on one leg and plays the flute, is he going to be there? And he said, yes. And I said, as you can imagine, I just said, well, I don't think he will be. That's me, and I'm doing something else that day. And
oh, mercy.
I advise you to change your advertising copy. But, I mean, it was, that's what happens. And it's going to happen. That's what promoters do.
Of course.
And it's, in a sense, I think you've got to be quite clear about the relationship. But, I don't feel embarrassed about tying my name and Jethro Tull as a name together, because it's my music. For me, the job is the same. Whether it doesn't matter what it says on the ticket, it doesn't change what I do on the stage, because it's just, I'm up there playing my music. For me, nothing changes. It's really the perspective, I suppose, that some people have with a sort of wistful nostalgia, that they feel they want to see the original band together on stage. And I can understand that, but I don't think we're quite talking about a band of people who sort of somehow are equal quarters or fifths of the equation. They can't be, because by definition Jethro Tull is about 22 different band members.
Right.
And so there is a bit of a kind of a revolving door thing going on there, which has been that way since pretty much the beginning, and it's not something that has resulted in breakups, bad feelings, or whatever else. It's like having an extended family. I mean, I'm very grateful for having had all the opportunity to play with all these different people who've all had their positive influence that they brought to bear on the music and on the way I write and put music together, because to a large extent, I will be thinking about the other guys when I'm writing music, trying to write to their strong points rather than their failings. Right. So it is something that you as a songwriter, will be very much affected by your bandmates and the kind of music that that will excite them, or music that will not. And sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes you think they're going to love this and they hate it, or the other way around. But for the most part, you do take it into account that you're working with a group of people that may not be the same group of people that you'll be working with in 2 years' time or were working with a couple of years ago, because people come and go. People have priorities. They don't always get shoved. They very often have other things, other plans, things to do, and that's good.
I wanted to ask you, I know you've got to go in a couple of minutes, I wanted to ask you about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and obviously you've had a long career, you've had many hit records, platinum records, world tours, and not even a nod of any kind. What is your take on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and why it is so non-representative of the average person's real listening taste?
Well, I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, first of all, has got to be put into the context of being an American cultural showcase. Mm-hmm. It's there to be kind of like a museum showcase of all that's great about American music, and I don't think it's there primarily to serve the interests or to reflect the glory days of the Viking hordes, the Led Zeppelins and the Who and the Jethro Tulls and all these other people who, one time or another, have come in to claim a piece of American loyalty and affiliation. It's really there for the American artist, and I think primarily it's got to be its first and foremost duty is to reflect the great music that's come out of America, which of course has influenced many of us back in the UK. Although the counter influence is obviously there as well, and I think that's recognised to some degree in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But it's there for Americans. I would personally think it would be letting it down a bit if it started to pay too much attention to the foreigners. So that's my first feeling. And if you are going to honour some foreigners in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I think they've got to be those that perhaps fit better with the American musical genre. So it's better that it's people who do more American sounding music. Frankly,
right.
I mean that's just my gut feeling, but I don't really have huge feelings about it in the same way that I have huge feelings about the Grammys. These things it's peer group recognition to an extent in the case of the Grammys, in the way that these things are awarded and voted for, and in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's I think certainly traditionally has had a pretty much a management style that is very supportive of American talent first and foremost over everything else, and I think that's right and proper. Yeah. So I certainly don't have any feelings of animosity or feelings of neglect of being honoured by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, I once went there to Cleveland to have a look around, and I think I saw myself in there, or at least a sort of tailor's dummy wearing some old clothes of mine, and it's that I gave them when they first started up. So I was there actually, funnily enough, standing next to a very small Rod Stewart glass case somewhere. So I can remember being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but being honoured and whatever, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or whatever is something that it would be very embarrassing to me to be asked to do something like that, and then have to say, well, actually I can't. I've got to be in Iceland that day. I mean, I'm a working musician. I'm afraid that award ceremonies or any of these kind of peer group pats on the head, but just not going to rate very highly in my priorities. And it's nice to be recognised, but it's not nice to have it, I don't know, too conspicuously recognised, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So gold records on the wall, and or titles after your name. It's just not something that I think is. I don't feel that great about it, but that doesn't mean I don't value being the recipient of such honours. It's just, you say thank you very much. It's very nice to have, but you don't have to show them off to the neighbours.
Well, very good. Well, I know you have to go. Is there anything else you want to say about the upcoming album and tour before you go?
Well, there are lots of things I can say about it, but I suppose the most fundamentally important thing that from a fan's perspective is that I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this for me because it's going to be a lot of fun, and detail, and I think I'm going to enjoy the outcome of it. I spent yesterday with the musicians going through all of the original Thick as a Brick material, particularly side 2. We had to sit down and make some, positive but difficult choices about who's going to play what and when, because there's all these places where there's 2 acoustic guitars, vocals and flute all occurring at the same time, and I can't do both at the same time live. So, we have to divide up a lot of parts and decide what to leave out, what to recreate on another instrument, where we're going to try to use the original instrument, where we're going to have to sacrifice a musical line that we simply can't put all together. And it's kind of interesting. It's quite challenging, particularly the first half of the second side of the vinyl album, if you see what I mean, is a chunk where there's quite a lot of not difficult music to play so much as just being difficult because it's rather orchestrated, and so we have to work out who's going to do what, and preferably make it practical and workable. But we're all really excited about doing it. And I know the other guys have had a lot of fun working on the music so far that they haven't ever played before, and it's both a challenge but also one that I think they've really come to enjoy the music for what it is. I mean, the new album's relatively easy because it's fresh in the mind, and we designed that one very much to be very playable live, so it doesn't present major issues. It's to say it's the original album is the one that's the hardest, and also to bring it alive in a theatrical sense as well, with the peripheral events of another person on stage doing singing, dance, mime, whatever, and with the audio-visual components of a video screen with a whole bunch of stuff that happens on and off through the show. So all of these elements together make it quite a challenge, and one that I'm looking forward to. But as I say, it's a commitment for quite a period of time, and at the end of it all, it'll be time to move on. And but for the next 18 months or so, it's fairly all-consuming, really. Looking forward to it, and can't wait to get out there. Preferably, I'd like to skip straight to the end of the first week, if that was possible. We could start with show number 8. It would be brilliant.
Yeah.
Show number 1, 2, and 3 could just be a little stressful.
Yeah.
There we go. Anyway, good to talk to you.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thanks.